Hello, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all joining us from across the world. My name is Furqan Ahmed, and I warmly welcome you to this international webinar on faith in the margins, the meaning of Easter for persecuted Christians. So, before we commence, it is with profound sorrow that we mourn the recent passing of His Holiness Pope Francis. His legacy as a moral compass of compassion, humanity, and justice for the marginalized has left an indelible mark not only upon the Catholic Church but also on the global conscience. His unwavering advocacy for interfaith harmony, ecological integrity, and defense of persecuted minorities has now become a void, a gap that feels even more acute in this critical moment of history. As we gather today to reflect on Easter's meaning for persecuted Christians, we do so with hearts heavy in mourning, yet also resolute in continuing the vision Pope Francis so powerfully embodied, a vision where mercy is not weakness and faith becomes force for healing and human dignity. As I mentioned previously, that this event is convened by South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, where we seek to explore how Christian communities living on the margins, often in the shadows of violence, exclusion, and displacement, make meaning of Easter in the face of suffering. How does resurrection theology resonate in the context of systematic oppression, and what lessons might the global community draw from those whose faith endure in adversity? We are truly delighted today uh, to have the company by an illustrious panel of scholars, theologians, journalists, and human rights advocates from across the world, each of whom brings a unique perspective and geographic insight to this discourse. So, uh, we are truly grateful to Cardinal Joseph Coutts for accepting our offer of invitation. Cardinal Coutts is the Metropolitan Archbishop Emeritus of Karachi, and we're joined by Cynthia Stephen, the social policy researcher and independent journalist from India. We have the company of Professor Shah from Federal University of Maranhão and Faculty of Law of Vitória from Sao Paulo, Brazil. We are grateful to Professor Dr. Goldy M. George, who is an activist, author, and academician. Filipe Derviş, freelance journalist specializing in religious affairs from Lisbon. Syed Muaz, who is the executive director, Center for Islamic Law and Human Rights. And lastly, we have the company of our Endnote speaker from Professor Muhammet Derviş Mete, who is pursuing his PhD from University of Edinburgh. So to begin with, we are honored to welcome His Eminence Cardinal Joseph Coutts, Metropolitan Archbishop Emeritus of Karachi, whose life and ministry have embodied a courageous witness to interfaith solidarity and Christian perseverance in Pakistan. Cardinal Coutts, we invite your reflection on the theological and pastoral dimensions of Easter amidst persecution. The floor is yours.
Well, a very good morning and a good afternoon and a good evening to all you participants. Dear friends, it's a completely new experience for me, talking with a group from the different corners of the globe. And I was not clear about exactly how we are going to put things together because we come from different experience backgrounds. Anyway, like just to say now, I'm from Pakistan. Pakistan is 95 or 96% Muslim. Officially, it's an Islamic state. But I think there's quite a big difference between, let's say, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, or even our neighbor, Iran and Pakistan. So we are really a democratic country. We don't have the total full Islamic system. And our constitution ensures freedom of worship to all non-Muslims. And this, in the title here, you mentioned about persecuted Christians. I wouldn't exactly use the word persecuted Christians, for the Christians in Pakistan. Thank God, as I said, we do have that freedom. We have a ministry for religious affairs and harmony with minorities, which is, it's gaining, the word harmony is gaining more and more current usage nowadays, which is a good thing. So I'm not quite sure how it is with all the others, but we have discrimination, we have problems. We are marginalized in certain, and we even looked down upon sometimes. But I wouldn't consider ourselves really in that sense. Persecuted can be a very strong word if you take it in another sense. Now, coming back to Christians and this Easter season, you see, every religion, sort of, I think nearly every religion. I'm not a professor of phenomenology or philosophy or something, but it includes the transcendent. It includes mysteries, because God is transcendent, invisible. So we use a lot of symbols to express the reality of God in our lives and in our different religions. So that's something we've got to understand in when we talk about other religions. You know, just for example, we also have a Hindu minority in Pakistan. I know they have one festival, I know, which is called Diwali or Deepavali, which is called the Festival of Lights. Now, if you just look at it, just what's it all about? They're putting all these lights everywhere. But there's a deep symbolism there. The meaning of light and darkness can be taken in different meanings. Now, as I said, my background is different. My current situation in life is different. Pakistan is an Islamic country, but we also have very good relations among all the different religious groups. We have a very small Zoroastrian community, some Hindus, some Sikhs, and then the Christians is the largest minority group. Now, there is a lot of closeness between Islam and Christianity, of course, with acceptance of the differences. This idea of people of the book, it's there. And so our festivals. Christmas appeals a lot to the Muslims. And I remember a Muslim friend of mine a few years ago saying to me, he says, after a few days, you are going to celebrate Christmas. He says, I'm a Muslim. Can I not celebrate Christmas with you? So I said, of course, because we were friends. I said, come and join us for lunch on Christmas Day. He said, no, I don't mean that. I mean, for me, it's the birthday, a milad, of a prophet, Jesus, because I'm a Muslim. And it's a cause of joy. So I feel like celebrating with the Christians, the birthday of a prophet. You see, that there is a common bond there. And Christmas is a very appealing festival with Christmas tree and all sorts of symbols are used with angels and all this kind of thing. But Easter is a little more difficult because as a Christian, I believe that Jesus Christ, God raised him up on the third day after he had died, which a Muslim does not believe, of course, that how could a prophet have been killed? You know, you Christians are mistaken. He was unconscious and then Jesus recovered, and it was really Judas who was put on the cross. So we don't have anything really common there. Maybe the meaning of Easter as God is able to give new life, or that as human beings, God has created us not just to return to dust forever, but that God ultimately we will see and be with our Creator. There will be a last judgment, and we will be able to be united with our Creator who created us when we had never seen before, and that He has the power to raise up the dead as He raised up Jesus from the dead. So there is a different sort of feeling there in the kind of festival we are celebrating now. And also in the situation in which you live, how is it being taken by the majority community in which all these Christian groups, mostly in Asia, maybe with the exception of the Philippines and East Timor, which is a very small place. Christianity is a small minority, and we have different experiences, different places. So I myself am very keen to hear from you and to see how we can live our lives, live our faith. Now, here in Pakistan, where majority of our Christians are on the lower social economic level, and we have a hard life, as I said, a lot of discrimination, and maybe not acceptance as equals, but rather like, the old idea of Islam of being a dhimmi, that since it's a Muslim government, you are second-class citizens. The president of Pakistan cannot be a Christian, and so on and so on. So there are difficulties challenges that we have to face. Now, I don't know how exactly it is in other situations. So we have a little bit of everything. We are now, these days, it's extremism. Right next door, we have the government of Afghanistan, which is Taliban, which has a whole different ideology, which is totally different, let's say, from the Sufi Muslims we have in Pakistan, who have a different way of understanding human life. And when I meet a Sufi friend, he'll say, oh, we're brothers because we believe in God, we believe in one creator, and we've all been by him, etc. And it's a different story. But where the Taliban have a way of looking at things and looking at us, who we are. So with just these few words, I think I should stop here and listen more than speak. Listen to what our friends all together here, what we can put together to enlighten us in this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cardinal Coutts, for your remarks and opening remarks for this webinar. We will quickly move to our next speaker, Cynthia Stephen, who is an independent social policy researcher and analyst, an independent journalist. She is also a well-known trainer on gender policy and development issue. She has written a large number of articles for newspapers, magazines, and journals, as well as contributed chapters to several books, including On the Girl Child and Experiences of Discrimination in Higher Education in India. Her body of work includes leadership in several people's initiatives for justice, large countrywide women's empowerment groups, and theoretical work on women's concerns from the unrecognized perspectives of women and girls from the large number of marginalized sections in India. She is the president of Training, Editorial and Development Services Trust, which is TEDS Trust, from Bangalore, India. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm grateful to Sarim as always for the wonderful opportunities they provide for interaction on very important, crucial issues relating to minorities' concerns. And it is my joy and privilege to share briefly on what Easter means to the persecuted Christians and in India. Now, we are this afternoon looking the Shah not happening, and yes, a large number of tourists, civilians were killed, and we as a nation grieve with all the families of those who have lost dear ones. We join the rest of the world, in fact, in remembering and honoring the memory and paying homage to our dear Pope Francis, who has attained his eternal home. And we also want to, at this time, realize that we are doing this in the shadow of a very, very important event, in fact, and that is the life of Jesus Christ. As the Cardinal has explained, the large number of Muslims believe and honor his name as a prophet. And so he is a prophet too, because the name Messiah means prophet, priest, and king. And so there are those who believe he's a prophet, there are those who believe he's a priest, and all the Christians believe that he is the Messiah, the one who has brought the savior of the world. And the thing about Easter and the Lord Jesus' life, death, and challenges the meaning of the finality of death. And in order to illustrate this, there is no better example. That is miracles involved of Lazarus, brother of his two friends. The whole family were close to Martha and the sisters, and was Lazarus. And they were a own family, very hospitable, and they were welcome Jesus and his disciples. So it was very far away. They brought to him that Lazarus, your friend, is dead. Now, when a friend dies, then the instinct is to immediately rush to the home of the where the loss has taken place. But we find that the account says that Jesus tarried where he was for 2 days, and then he set off to say, "Let's go to the to Lazarus's place." And so he shows up there, and it was already 4 days by the time he reaches. And his sister greets him and says, "Lord, if you had been here, this would not have happened. You would have raised him. You would not have allowed him to die." And then he says, actually, he makes a very, very pivotal statement in John chapter 11. He says, Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live even if he dies." And she says, "Yes, Lord, we do believe in life after death. We know that he will rise again." He says, you have to believe. Then after that, he said, and then they went to the grave, because he was a prominent man and because Jesus also was well known. There were a large entourage following Jesus, plus there were mourners from Jerusalem who had come. There was a large crowd, and at this spot, Jesus says, he weeps in sympathy with the sisters and shares their grief, and then he says, here, this is where they go to the tomb, and then they say, open the grave, roll the stone away. Then the sister says, "No, Lord, don't do that. It's already 4 days. There will be a smell. Decay would have set in." Then he asks again, he says, "Did I not say that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And this is the beauty. And then what happens is then he prays, he says, "Lord, I know that you have sent me, but I'm praying so that those who are around will also hear this. And then I know you always hear me and listen to me." In his prayer, he's telling Lord, he's the God. And he said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I have said this because of the people standing around, so that they may believe that you have sent me and you have made me your representative." And then when he had said this, he shouted with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." Out came the man who had been dead, his hands and feet wrapped in burial cloths, with a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Unwrap and release him." Now, I believe that in the Old Testament, there were many prophets, and there were certain prophets, particularly Jeremiah, who God said to enact parables. So God used to tell Jeremiah, "Lie on one side for 21 days. And he had to lie on one side for 21 days to say, "For 21 times I have, you have disobeyed me," or whatever. So his life, his body itself becomes a way of illustrating to the people of Israel that God is angry with them. In the same way here, I believe that there was an enactment of something that was going to happen. And that is the story. The fact is that there was a tomb, there was a closed tomb, it was opened, a man came out alive. Hundreds of people witnessed this. And then it created a huge excitement across the whole countryside. The Passover was coming. People were leaving to Jerusalem. And we know, of course, that after this event, it is said to have happened on the Saturday before Palm Sunday, the entrance of Jesus into Jerusalem. And so there was a lot of public excitement and suspense. And the authorities were very, very annoyed. And that is where time Jesus's fate was sealed. And the the keepers of the temple decided that they passed a death sentence on Jesus and decided that he should not live again. But see, the story is that they did put his body to death. But we know that on the third day, that is after the Passover, on the morning of the Sabbath, after the Sabbath, on the Sunday morning, the triumphal resurrection of Jesus has been depicted in the Bible. And this is the real reason. See, the Christmas is a time of hope and joy. The messages, the angel's message is peace and goodwill towards men. And here it is that there is eternal hope because death has been defeated and hope and eternal life is sure for everyone who believes. And so that is the joy that every Christian has, particularly the ones who have been persecuted. In recent years, the levels of religious persecution across the world has gone up greatly. It's not only Christians. There have been Hindus in neighboring countries who have faced it. There are Christians who are facing it in Islamic countries. There are Christians facing it in our country. And it's not about any one religion or any one faith. It is a testing of faith itself. And I would say that rather than point to any religious identity, the fact of the matter is that God is no respecter of persons. He does not believe in religions. He believes in love and hope. And the message is that, so in India, we have a very notable instance of persecution that took place in Kandhamal 15 years ago. And there is a large story of thousands of people displaced, hundreds of people dead, many institutions burnt, many churches destroyed. And now, what is the story 15 years later? We have a journalist who has followed this, Anto Akkara, and he writes that the story of Kandhamal is a story of joy, peace, restoration, and hope. And even those who were instrumental in the violence or in the villages, they have come back and become friends, and people are rejoicing. And there has been such a resurgence of faith across this district that he says he went to a convent to address his sisters. There were a bunch of nuns, novices who were going to become nuns. And he says out of 29, 28 of them women were from Kandhamal who had dedicated their life to service of God and man as nuns. So that is the beauty and the joy of Easter. That is the joy of the resurrection, that death is not final. The beauty is that violence may be there, persecution may be there, but that is a transient phase. The reality is that peace, joy, and restoration and of life and the resurrection of the human soul, that is the reality. So that is the real joy. So I want to say, wherever we are, whether we are in Iran, whether we are in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Manipur in particular has faced severe persecution across almost 2 years now, more than 1.5 months. There are continuing instances of religious persecution across many North Indian states. But we, the Christians in India, are not despondent, because we know that it is the Lord who is in control of our nation. In fact, our anthem talks about Bharat Bhagya Vidata. It means the Lord who is the arbiter of our fate, of not just, it's Bhagya is not fate but fortunes. So even our anthem, the national anthem, honors the one God, and we rejoice in a country that acknowledges that there is a God above who loves us as created human beings to live together in peace and harmony. So this is the message of Easter for any persecuted minority. I'm not saying that only Christians are persecuted, There are Muslims who are persecuted. There are Hindus who are persecuted. There are Parsis who have been persecuted. And among Muslims also, there are other small groups who are also persecuted for the nature of their faith. So, but the God above is not a respecter of persons. He is not a man of religion. He is a man of love. He is a creator who loves us like a father. And we can always count on his presence and restoration in our life. This is the joyous message, actually, I would like to share about Easter. Thank you so much, Furqan and Sarim, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for providing us the comprehensive and a profoundly, touched message of Easter. So I will quickly would be turning on my focus from India to Brazil to Professor Shah, who has joined us very early in the morning. The Professor Shah is a full professor of law and geopolitics at the graduate law program of Federal University of Maranhão, as well as UFMS graduate program in airspace engineering. He serves as a state criminal prosecutor with the Public Ministry of Maranhão. Dr. Shah holds a PhD in constitutional law and a graduate degree in politics strategies from Brazil's Superior War College. He is an associate member of leading national international associations and institutions like International Law Association, IPSA, European Study of International Law, American Political Science Association, and the International Association of Prosecutors, among others. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues, Your Eminence, Mr. Cardinal Joseph Coutts. It was very pleasant to listen to you and learn from you, as also from Your Excellency, my dear colleague, Cynthia Stephen. I'm fully in agreement with the meaning of Easter from the shared perspective by you. So it was very pleasant and hopeful to listen your understanding and share it with us regarding the role of the resurrection. And I also like to congratulate my other colleagues in this panel. Many thanks for the organizers, Mr. Furqan Ahmed, Professor Muhammet, Mete. It's very pleasant to meet you again, although it's an online system. So I guess that all of us, we agree that the faith in the margins, it's a very complex intersection of religious persecution, state authority, and international human rights frameworks. So in the brief time that I'm granted to, I'd like to share 3 or 4 perspectives in this short time from the legal framework perspective. But I'm trying to provoke our reflection on the cut thought. What is the role of state in modern times? And would it be possible that we can understand the meaning of democracy and human rights protections, recognizing religion as a fundamental right? I think that this is the key question that we have to somehow think about. And from that point, states, governments, civil societies, religion, institutions, all of us, we have to agree in the end of the day that our human history is remarked by violence from every different perspective and under different understanding of which would be the right religion to guide moral patterns in our society. So first, I have to remember me that as legal scholar and as citizen in Brazil, all of us, we are under legal frameworks. It doesn't matter if I'm in Brazil, you are in Turkey, or in India or Pakistan. Your Eminence, Cardinal Joseph, he opened his remarks, remembering all of us that he lives in a society abridged by the conception of constitutional rule of law. As also Cynthia has mentioned, the disparities, in one hand, there are legal acts, legal statutes granting protection from the perspective of state acting. Nonetheless, on the other hand, there is this disconnection between what the law says and what society has been done with the meaning of the law. So if we check the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we can see on the Article 18th that freedom of religion is entitled as a universal human right. If you read the Article 12th of the American Declaration of Human Rights, also we're gonna find in that article freedom of religion, established formally from the perspective that all of us in Americas would be entitled to exercise freedom of religions and to exercise our faith. So the meaning, of course, of Easter carries a transformative meaning beyond its theological significance. At its core, Easter represents the ultimate triumph over suffering and death. Yet we have to answer the question, would it be possible that we people with different cultures, different living perspectives, and moral standards, would it be possible that we can live in the same society, respecting the differences? So when we talk about the fundamental rights, of course, we have to deal with the inequalities. But we cannot only be concerned with inequalities from the social perspective. We have to face the challenges derived from the differences as well. So what would be the role of the rule of law as a guiding principle upon which we organize our social institutions? And social institutions comprises the church itself, the government itself, the public ministry. As a prosecutor in Brazil, of course, I'm obliged under constitutional foundations to respect and observe civil liberties. Yet, most of our countries, and I think that Pakistan, India, Brazil, Portugal, Turkey, all our countries, we are signers for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So a sensitive challenge that I can remember is the tension between religious neutrality and state control. Human history has witnessed that whenever the dominance is written, deteriorating the role of the state and the instrumental use of religion, we have faced atrocity, violence, dominance, subjugation. So in this time, when we suppose that we have achieved a level of rationality and understanding how politics and the rule of law and civil liberties would meaning for each one of us, I think that it's the time that we have to agree beyond what we have been done. I will not bring to the discussion statistics because each one of us, we have heard, we have read, we know where the persecuted are, where the minorities are suffering, regardless their religions. But when we see the difference, politic differences, cultural differences, gender differences, inequalities, social inequalities, currently are aggravated. So finally, as two observations, the gap between international standards and local implementation, this is our day-to-day challenge. The disconnect between international human rights frameworks and the local implementation represents one of the most persistent challenges for persecuted Christians. But we can replace the word Christians for minorities. Persecuted women, persecuted children, persecuted cultures. Despite approximately 76% of countries worldwide including provisions for religious freedom in their constitutions, unfortunately, the practical reality often diverges significantly from these legal guarantees. So our problem mostly is not the lack of elements inside the legal frameworks, but the disconnection, the disrespect of what the law states and how local authorities interpret the meaning of the law. And finally, if we regard also for the International Convention of Political Rights and Civil Liberties, once again, the International Covenant establishes religion as civil right and civil liberty. But once again, when we check the context of physical security and violence against worshippers, we get the data of persecution. So as the final remark, I would say that we have to implement policies comprising the recognition of differences in our societies and to leverage the understanding of democracy and mostly to implement and enforce tools to preserve the human dignity. So if we just dress us out from the adjectives and protect the human substance, I think we're gonna comply with the real understanding of the Easter, meaning reborn for a life with dignity and the protection of human being, without classifying us by nationalism, by culture, whatever. So, of course, the endeavor is very challengeable. Thank you very much, Furqan. My respects.
Thank you so much, Professor Shah, for framing up legal and multicultural, multidisciplinary perspective on this discourse today. I apologize for not be making any insertions from my end because we have a person, Professor Muhammet Mete, who would be doing so as an Endnote speaker. So I quickly jump on from Brazil to India, where Professor Dr. Goldy M. George is waiting. Dr. George is a social scientist, writer, and Dalit activist. For more than 3 decades, he holds a PhD from Tata Institution of Social Sciences and has worked for promoting the rights of marginalized sections in India. Over these decades, Dr. George has conducted hundreds of training sessions. He had written extensively and has been a key contributor in many national and international processes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hear me? Okay. First and foremost, I thank Sarim and more specifically Furqan, who kept speaking to me on regular intervals. Although I couldn't join in the last couple of rounds when he asked me to join, but still I am thankful that he has remembered me. I'm also very delighted to listen to Cardinal Joseph Coutts, and His Excellency has been very kind enough to bring in the situation of the Christian minorities in Pakistan. And my old friend, Cynthia, I always cherish when she's around, and I'm also thankful to Professor Chai from Brazil, who has taken out his time. I would have, in fact, wanted to be the last person after listening to all of you, because I would also know more about each one of them. However, I welcome and I express my good wishes to my fellow panelists. Now, when we talk about persecution, in fact, I would like to look at it from a different perspective, more in the context of what persecution is, specifically from the Indian as well as also from some international experiences. Now, persecution, it is a very systematic mechanism by a set of people applying violent means and methods based on a violent ideology in order to dominate, dismiss another set of people and their beliefs and their ideas, principles, notions, philosophies, etc. And definitely it has got a very strong ideological basis at one end, and also it creates a sense of fear on the other end among those who are the victims and at the receiving end. So it is a very forceful method. It's a very powerful and very forceful method to establish one's beliefs over that of other. So in another way, we could say persecution is an act of, harassing, oppressing, depriving, dismissing, killing, and all forms of multiple forms of violence one could see. And this historically has been one of the key tactics that one could use in a fascist state. It is not the entire tactics. It is one of the tactics. Persecuting minorities has been one of the key tactics. The reason is the minorities, particularly in India, the Christian population, and as far as I could say, even the Muslim brethren, they are actually in a way or other soft targets. Christians are more soft targets. Christians are more soft targets than Muslims, because Muslims are more organized than Christians in this country. There are many reasons to look at this factor from the Indian context, and so one of the key reason is that one of the national surveys, which is it is a government institution, which is basically the National Family Health Survey of 2015, it says that 78% of people among the Christians, they come from the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes of this country. That means 22% from scheduled caste, around 30% from ST, scheduled tribe, and around 26% from the other backward classes. So there's 78% of people who comprise the Indian Christians. It is a sizable majority within the religion in that sense. Now, so basically, when you attack the Christian population, if you look at some of the recent attacks in Chhattisgarh, in Odisha, Cynthia was speaking about Odisha. So in Odisha, in Jharkhand, and all those places, you could see that it is basically the tribal people who are under the attack, or the Dalit people who are under the attack. So in a way, attack on Christians in Indian context is it's also an attack on the already oppressed and marginalized humanities of this country. So in a way, Dalits who want to come out of the fold and want to become more independent, they are attacked. Adivasi who wanted to come out of the fold, they are also attacked. Almost a century and a half ago, Mahatma Phule said that the idea of Hindu religion is all about slavery. It is slavery, it is nothing but slavery. And if you look at this thing, the idea of why scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes want to come out of this fold is also to escape this slavery. So this is a very key aspect in the Indian context. It is a slavery that they are trying to escape. If we look at the constitution, you could see key components which are biblical in all aspects within the Indian constitution. You can see the idea of justice, equality, liberty, and fraternity, which is very strongly inscribed and enshrined in the constitution. You can see Article 25 to 30, which is perfectly in line with the freedom of religion, whether it is the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, whether it's any of the international declarations, it goes in line with that. Now, what we see at the moment is that there is a consistent methodical pattern that we have seen in India in terms of building and a consistent attack on the minority communities. And we can see in at least in 11 or 12 states, Indian states, which is ruled by the BJP, we can see very powerful anti-conversion laws which has come into existence. So you can see how the constitutional value is being, dismissed by bringing in parallel laws and parallel accounts in this country. Now, what we need to understand, there are many other aspects. There is a delisting movement that's going on at the moment. There is a movement, against beef eating. There is a movement against love jihad. You can see several of these movements, what you can see one after another, which is arising in everyday context. There's beating of pastors, beating of believers, taking away of their household things, banning of them from social gatherings, banning them from the villages, ostracizing them, they're throwing up from the village. You could see a series of things happening. So persecution in India is not a sometime happening, it is a everyday life in the Indian context. So persecution is and we need to also look at that these are actually anti-constitutional. These are against the law. Yes, I agree to Cardinal, and I also agree with Professor Chai that we all live in a legal system. The persecution in India is no way legal, but there is a counter legalization and legitimization pattern that has existed in this country. Now, it is based on the contradictions of social system, because the caste system does not allow people of the lower caste background to be equal with the upper caste people. It is in contradiction with the Indian constitution. It is in contradiction with the international laws. You can look at the four, mechanism, the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review. The last review was of India in 2022. And you could see in that there is more than 400 recommendations that has come up, out of which a sizable number goes around persecution against minorities, more specifically against Christians. So what I'm trying to say, that this is a grim situation in this country. I'm also seeing a similar situation which is coming up in the United States. So you can see it is becoming a global phenomenon. It is not just a national phenomenon. It's not like a local phenomenon. It's not a regional phenomenon. It is becoming a national phenomenon, and in all these spaces, there is a crisis which is growing, and from a Christian perspective, I would say this is also the signs and symbols of the second coming of the Lord, because it is coming very close. And on the cross, just before death, Jesus, this is supposed to be the sixth version. I mean, 7 things Jesus spoke on this cross, and he said, "Tetelestai." So tetelestai is basically, it is finished, it is over. So he has finished a major task. He has finished a major task. And what was it? He has finished a major task, that no more there is need of any sort of animal sacrifice once and forever. There is the Son of God who is sacrificing himself to bear the entire world's burden, the sins of the entire world. So he has actually, what is the burden of the entire world? The burden of the entire world is the chains in which people are chained. And the Easter message is the freedom from the chains and freedom from all forms of slavery, whether it is social slavery, whether it is cultural slavery, whether it is economic, whether it is political, whether it is spiritual, breaking the chains of all those slavery. That is basically what you see in the cross. And second major task, or second major thing which Jesus brings in on the cross, is the fullness of life, or what you also call it as new life or eternal life. The fullness of life, the new life, or eternal life. Now, this is what is the message that we have. Even though we are persecuted, we are not done. We are not bowing down to those persecutors. Yes, this India at the moment wants to create a kind of a slogan which has been given by, in 1920, it was given by Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, when he said, like when in Essentials he says, this nation is our Pitrabhumi and Punyabhumi, and he also makes that the enemies are the Muslims and the Christians, and Golwarkar goes ahead to say that we need to have one nation, one religion, one culture, one language, and everything is Hinduism, Hindustan, Hindi. So you can see how all these things are coming together at the moment. Dear friends, I'll just stop with a small story. And my friend was speaking about Kandhamal. I have been in Kandhamal since day one in 2008, in fact, since the pre-beginning of the persecution began. And I have known a persecutor in the sense he was a leader of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS, which is the one who wants to establish the Hindu nation in this country. He was a leader, he was a persecutor, and he persecuted many people. He was there on the forefront of hitting people. He was on the forefront of even killing people. He was the one who burned the houses, hundreds of houses. He was on the front, and today, this person is today a Christian pastor, and he has come to the Lord, and today he is spreading the love, and he grieves. And he grieves that what he did was the biggest sin of his life. And he has been a pastor, and he's pastoring to his people. I know my time is over, Furqan. I can see it from your face. I'll just stop. Satyamev Jayate is a national slogan that this country has. Yes, truth will triumph. In any case, I have 2 recommendations quickly. what we need to do in this context is that persecuted humanities across the world should come together. There should be the strengthening of international cooperation and solidarity expression of persecuted humanities across the world. And we also need to bring in more stronger, we need to, I would say, invoke and revoke. We have to invoke and revoke the human rights mechanisms that has been already established through UDHR, through UPR, to UN systems. And the nation states should come forward in support of the persecuted humanities. Thank you very much, and thank you for bearing me, though I took a little extra time. Thank you all, my dear friends.
Thank you so much, Dr. George, for providing your perspective on the social justice system and in the loopholes that fall within the India and other South Asian countries. So from India now we would turn our attention to Lisbon, Portugal, to our colleague Mr. Filipe de Villiers, who is a distinguished journalist specializing in reporting on religious affairs with a career spanning over 2 decades. His work is deeply rooted in his academic background in international relations. Today, he serves as a freelance journalist and associated with international organizations like Aid to the Church in Need, which is ACN. Philip's approach to journalism is defined by a commitment of truth, sensitivity, and the focus on both challenges and the hope within religious communities around the world. The floor is yours.
Furqan, and thank you to all the other speakers. It's a privilege to be here and to be in your company. I'm not an academic, unlike most of you. My job is to very much to try and bring to light stories from around the world on Christian communities in need. Therefore, as Bishop Cardinal Joseph Coutts is a member, but I interviewed him when he was in Lisbon several years ago. So what I'm going to try and with this idea that you proposed of the importance of Easter for persecuted Christians, lessons from Easter, and some of the stories of example. How important is Easter in a country where there is no freedom of worship, there is no freedom of where freedom of expression is very limited? I believe that Easter symbolizes respect for the free will of man. God put himself in the hands of man. Jesus, who God is, of course, you know, put himself in the hands of man and subject to the will of man, and even up to the point of death. And by doing so, he made freedom of expression a sacred thing also, not just a human right guaranteed, but a sacred right. And to Christians, free will is a sacred right. And so this is something that fills the Christians in China with hope. It is future, even when they are sometimes prevented from living this right fully by the authorities in China. To Nicaragua, for example, as many of you will know, Nicaragua is severely persecuting the Catholic Church, namely priests and bishops. Dozens, if not hundreds, of Nicaraguan priests have been exiled. They are arrested in waves to hold their processions. At this current time, their homilies have to be police who infiltrate the churches or have to be subject to approval by the police in terms of religious freedom. And to Christians in Nicaragua, be they clerics or present them with hope in this situation. I would remind them if I was speaking to them, and I believe by the civil authorities of his time. It was Pilate who sentenced Jesus to death, or Herod could have helped him but did not. Even the Sanhedrin, the religious authorities, of course, were the Jewish authorities who were religious, but also were the only authorities that the Jewish community had. They also convicted and sent Jesus to his death. And yet today, where is the Roman Empire, the mighty, great Roman Empire? it's gone. Of course, there are remnants. I'm in Portugal. We are descendants of the Roman Empire and the Latin culture, but the Roman Empire is gone. The persecution of Christians that it represented and which lasted centuries is gone. King Herod is gone. The Sanhedrin is gone. So these institutions that will persecute the church and that persecute religious believers, they will pass with time. All these things too shall pass, and Christians will believe and take hope in that if they continue to bear witness to the truth, if they continue to live with the true spirit of Christianity, that they as a community will prevail, even if some of them may suffer or lose their lives in the meantime. And now moving to a completely different setting, Nigeria. Nigeria has become almost a poster, a case study for Christian persecution in Africa in recent decades and over the past few years. The persecution itself that occurs and that is very real has a very complex set of reasons behind it. It is partly religious persecution in some areas, partly ethnic, an ethnic conflict between an age-old ethnic conflict which predates either Christianity or Islam in Africa, between nomadic groups and settled farmer groups who then happen to have adopted different religions, and religion here aggravates it. But there is a religious dimension to persecution, and regardless of why the persecution is occurring, those who are persecuted will look to their religious traditions for hope. And I believe that the Christians in Nigeria will understand that and take courage from the fact that their dignity, their human dignity, is not something that is defined by their enemies, by those who persecute them. It is not defined by their suffering. The same way that Jesus showed that his dignity, his human dignity and his divine dignity, was in no way diminished by the fact that he was hung naked from a cross to die, the most humiliating form of capital punishment that there could be in the Roman Empire at that time. Yet he showed that dignity is something that comes from within and is above that. And this is something that I'm sure can also be a source of hope for Christians in countries like Nigeria, but others where there is this persecution. Of course, many of you who I'm speaking to are Christians, are minorities in your countries. Some of you from majority Muslim countries. We know that there is a problem. We can't hide that in many Muslim majority countries where Christians are treated as second-class citizens, from the Middle East to Pakistan and others. And here also, I believe that we can find hope in the fact that the early Christians, after Easter represented a revolution, the birth of a new religion, something which began to distinguish itself from Judaism, but it was a minority, it was a small group at the time, it was subject to persecution. And yet, the early Christians did not respond to this persecution by lashing out. They did not respond with violence. They took the persecution, they prayed for those who were persecuting them, and they remained faithful to the teachings that they had received. And through that fidelity, they grew. They ended up by growing. In fact, it is a paradox that the first major persecution in Jerusalem forced the Christians to flee to the outskirts of Jerusalem and to other neighboring countries. And that ended up by being one of the key factors for the spread of Christianity. And so this also be a source of hope for many of those who are treated as second-class citizens still, to know that if they remain faithful, then their community also will prevail and will continue to be a light unto the nations, even if they don't convert the nations around them, that they will be able to serve them and be a witness of true Christian charity to them. And also for Christians in countries at war, even if they are not minorities, Christians who are living in Ukraine, Christians in South Sudan, also here a minority, but depending on the region, Christians in Myanmar, countries in which there are terrible wars are going on at the time. I hope that they will look to the Easter message, to the words of Jesus on the cross, as has been mentioned here. Some of those words, one of the things that Jesus said to those to God, but addressing those who were torturing and executing him, was, "Forgive them, Father." And this was an act of unconditional forgiveness. This was not, "Forgive them, Father, as long as they repent. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." And he said to the good thief who was crucified beside him, just as an aside, as a priest friend of mine often says, he was not a good thief, because if he was a good thief, he wouldn't have been caught. But he is known as the good thief, and he is one of the only people in history who we have absolute certainty in Christianity that he was saved, because Jesus said to him, "Today you will be in heaven with me." And so the people who suffer unjustly, especially the innocent civilians who suffer from war and from the lack of rights and freedoms that always come with war in their own countries, that they will understand, based on Jesus's example, that it is only through forgiveness that peace can be rebuilt, that it is only through forgiveness that a new beginning, that there can be a new beginning for these countries, and that the old wounds can be healed, and that they will be the leaven in the bread that will help to heal their nations and their countries. But finally, and so that we don't think that this is only a problem in countries in Asia or in the Middle East or in Africa, I would like to focus also on Western countries, where many times in the more secularized countries, we are starting to find Christians being persecuted also for sharing their beliefs, which are no longer understood by heavily secular societies. And I would give you the example of a 60-something-year-old lady in England, a country which gave us the idea of rights, of legal rights for everyone, and the constitutional system and so on. Livia Tosici-Bolt stood outside of an abortion clinic holding a sign that said, and this is all it said, "Here to talk if you want." This was all that she did, offering to be able to speak to people if they would like to speak, and to speak to her, and to be able to present them with alternatives to what they were doing. She was fined £2,000 for doing this. There are places in England and in Wales, and now in Scotland as well soon, or perhaps already, where it is a crime to pray in your own head. So even if not outspokenly, it is a crime to stand and silently pray within certain spaces near and around abortion clinics. This is also a form of persecution. And I believe that people like Livia Tosici-Bolt and others who have been in the same situation will look to the scene of the crucifixion and see the brave people who remained at Jesus' side right until the end. Not the big major apostles, only the youngest of the apostles, St. John, and otherwise only women had the courage to remain at Jesus' side, knowing that they faced ostracization, knowing that they faced persecution, ridicule from those who lived with them. And so I believe that that may also be a source of hope now at Easter time for all of those who now also want to remain and to give support to people who are in desperate need of it at this time. So thank you very much for your time. I went over a little bit, Furqan, but I hope you bear with me. And again, thank you so much for having invited me to share my thoughts with you today.
Thank you so much, Filipe, for providing the footprints regarding the persecution of Christians throughout the world. And I always admire your approach towards religious affairs. And now we will turn our focus to Pakistan again, where our colleague Syed Muaz Shah is patiently waiting for his turn. Syed Muaz Shah is a lawyer and legal academic specializing in alternative dispute resolution, which is ADR. He's an Islamic law human rights expert with an LLB from University of London. He has over 7 years of expertise in international child adoption and has successfully handled more than 30 plus cases and has consulted for organizations like UN Women, US State Department, and Islamic Relief. He is also a co-founder of the Ziauddin Faculty of Law, Politics, and Governance in Karachi. He led its Center for Human Rights for nearly 5 years. I happen to have a chance of working under his supervision as well. He currently serves as an executive director of Center for Islamic Law and Human Rights, bridging the gap between Islamic law and global rights frameworks. He also heads the law department at the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, which is ICC, Industry and Agriculture, focusing on sustainable Islamic models like ADR and Waqf. And he is also a legal liaison to OIC Arbitration Center. Over to you, Muaz.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I know it's been an hour into this and some interesting thoughts, and I've been taking notes from all the participants. So happy that you began this discussion and conversation by remembering our brother, the Pope Francis, who was an amazing person. I remember the day when he took the leadership of the Catholic Church. The message he gave that day really resonated. I still remember to this day about the emphasis he gave about the supporting most of the marginalized communities. And he actually came to Brazil, if I recall correctly, in those early days for one of his first visits. So happy to have Professor Shah here representing Brazil and emphasizing, the poor and the downtrodden. And this is where we need to work the most. So the message of his message was always to uplift the marginalized. And the topic for today, of course, is the minorities, which are the marginalized communities across the world, particularly in South Asia, and be that in India, be that in Bangladesh, be that in Sri Lanka, or any of the other communities. And interestingly, it's different communities in every sector. But of course, the Christian community is probably the most marginalized if you look at South Asia collectively, because you have significant Buddhist population in certain countries, you have significant Hindu population, obviously, in India, and you have significant Muslim populations in Pakistan and Bangladesh. But Christian population is probably, if we look at South Asia as a whole, is probably the most marginalized. One of the main things I like to do is combine the aspect of human rights and Islamic law and the importance of that, and how to bring those, bridge it together as a complementary tool to promote it not only within the Islamic community, the aspect of human rights, but also to understand and bridge the gap with non-Muslim community, how Islam stands with these very same values. This is how we create bond, the interfaith dialogue, and eradicate radicalism, be it in Islam or elsewhere as well, in their understanding of what this faith starts. So I'm just going to start with a few verses in the Quran, which I think are very central to understanding this. And I know Cardinal Joseph, His Eminence, and we met at the Irani consulate giving our condolences to the passing of the president last time. Is an amazing leader of the Christian community in Pakistan. He mentioned, I don't think there's a lot of similarities around Easter, but I think there are two key similarities that I think is very interesting, particularly in the Islamic tradition and the Christian tradition. One similarity is that the opponents of Jesus really thought that they had killed him in the capacity and caused him pain and harm. And this is something that both Christians and Muslims, we know that that true pain, it was more of a salvation. If you take it from a Christian perspective, from Muslims, we believe that he didn't suffer those. But the idea is his enemies thought that it would bring him much pain as a result of that. Their desire was to cause pain, to cause suffering. And that's something that, didn't happen. As, Cynthia put it very beautifully as well, he's alive. They tried to kill him, but he was alive. And that's the second similarity, which I think is important. If we take the principles of what happened in between, leave that alone, but go to the end, is Jesus is alive. And this is something that even Muslims and Christians collectively agree that he is indeed alive and that there is a sense of his return. So I think, when we talk about those similarities, I think that plays a very big, important role. In fact, in the Quran, it says, very interestingly, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, وَقَوْلِهِمْ إِنَّا قَتَلْنَا الْمَسِيحَ عِيسَى ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُ. And it's for their boasting that we killed him, that we destroyed him, that we, God forbid, Jesus, the son of Mary, the messenger of God. But neither did it had not gone the way they had thought. And I think this is very interesting. And then the following verse, which is actually also very intriguing, and it reflects on the Christian tradition as well, is the verse is very, very clear in that their thought process with that. It says, بَلْ رَفَعُهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا. Rather, God raised him up to himself, and God is all-wise and almighty. And we know this was the great callment back to God. And so I think this is something that I think we don't really talk about a lot. And interestingly, even in the Islamic tradition, which I will probably surprise most people here today, there's a verse in the Quran that talks about martyrs. And it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2, that says they think they have killed them, but indeed they are alive with God. So that gives a kind of another perspective to this. And of course, even in the Islamic tradition, they have different perspectives of that. But that's going into the technical details. The spirit of Jesus being alive, which I think is the most important thing, is something that I think we can all agree with. And this is what's important. This is where when Jesus, as Cynthia, my sister Cynthia said, is alive within us, right? When you exhibit those behaviors, when Filipe mentioned about forgiveness, achieving true peace, that's how we do it. This is those lessons. When we practice those lessons, we bring the spirit of Jesus alive within ourselves. And I think that is probably the most important lesson about the manner of his death and all that. How do we keep Jesus alive? How do we keep his message alive? And I think this is the message of Easter. And when we talk about Easter, I must also take a sad moment of silence for the sad events that happened in Sri Lanka many years ago. We still, unfortunately, have not been able to achieve with our people, the common people, in understanding and interfaith dialogue like we are doing here today to try to understand each other. One of the basic things I always tell young people, because it's the young people, if we can get them to understand, to collaborate, to meet each other, to have that sort of understanding. These biases and preconceived conceptions, they come from a lack of understanding, a lack of interaction, a lack of experience. So I always tell a lot of the Muslim youth here in Pakistan, when we talk about interfaith dialogue, I ask a very simple question. Do you have a Christian friend? Do you have a Hindu friend? Do you have a Buddhist friend? Because when you have a friend, you can sit and have tea with each other and ask those questions that are really, what you can say inflammatory in a certain sense, but there's like a friendly environment to share your ignorance. That, is it true that Christians believe this? And then there's, oh, come on, man, why would you say something like that? No, we believe this. And that clarity, when it happens in that friendly environment, in that confidential environment, allows that dialogue to have impact. And we need to create these spaces for young people to be able to meet and to be able to share. I remember in my own classroom, I had a Catholic student, and she had to defend herself because of some student had assumed a position, saying, oh, well, the Christians, they believe this. And she's like, no, we don't. And it became a debate in the class where I said, no, this is very good. I'm so happy that we're actually getting this out. And she's like, sir, explain to them. And I had, of course, read a little bit of the Bible. And I said, no, you have a misgiving. And I corrected the Muslim student that this is not, I don't even remember what the issue was. But the fact that creating the safe space to have that dialogue, to remove the prejudices and biases. And as Furqan and many others have hinted out, and I think it was Professor Shah as well, religion just becomes an after excuse. I'm sorry, it was Filipe, who mentions about Nigeria, the Yoruba and the Igbo tribes. And this is an old kind of struggle that religion has only kind of given it cover, and then people use it as a justification. I talk about when we talk about women's rights and child rights, and they have the issue of child marriage, particularly in Pakistan and many other countries. It's not that people say, oh, religiously, I'm allowed to marry my child, therefore I'm doing it. No, people are doing it because of economic reasons. People are doing it because of a lack of understanding. And then when it comes to a post-justification, oh, he was, the religion allows him. So often at times, religion is used as a kind of safety card, a justification after the fact. When people are actually, there are other reasons why they're doing it, be it economic, lack of knowledge, lack of interaction, and a sense of fear. And really, fear is the key thing. When we talk about the persecution of minorities, it is actually fear, which is the key component that throws people into that mob-like attitude that, oh, we must do something before, or it's like the safety of our families, the safety of our economics or whatever, and a scapegoat to somebody to target on. And this is where the minorities are targeted. Unfortunately, that incident. And then those, you have those characters that are always about those evil characters that are the walking devils amongst us that create those tinder boxes of flame and throw the match to get it lit, to take advantage of people's ignorance and steamroll what they're trying to do. And this creates those horrendous incidents that happen, just like we had in Easter in Sri Lanka. So this is a duty of all of us, be it Muslim, Christian leaders, Buddhist leaders, Hindu leaders, that we need to speak to our communities. We need to bring them together. We need to create safe spaces for young people to share these thoughts, to eliminate these barriers. This is what happens when you are stuck in your own kind of thought process and you don't have that kind of collaboration on that front. So when we talk about freedom of religion, I just wanted to add this because my brother Cássius spoke so passionately about freedom of religion. I always try to connect those Islamic values into that, to teach the Muslims that, look, these values, these human rights values are not foreign to us. They're actually within our faith. So in the Quran, it says, La ikraha fid din. There is no compulsion in religion. And that means people have the right to freedom of religion. Not only that, Cardinal Joseph, and I'm ashamed that Cardinal Joseph does not feel the level of equality that he should feel in this state. Why? Because when we look at the example of the Prophet, when Prophet Muhammad took over Medina and was given the administration of Medina, he wrote in the Constitution of Medina that everybody is one ummah, including the Jews, the Christians, and all the people. Nowadays, the term ummah is used like only for the Muslims. But here was an inclusive idea of the state, from a state perspective, because Cardinal mentioned about Pakistan as an Islamic state. The true Islamic state is to make all the people within the state feel like they're one ummah, or from one, ummah is a word referred to mother. So imagine from one motherland, for lack of a better word, one motherland. So that included Jews, that included Christians who kept to the covenant, which was the Constitution. Just like if the Constitution in Pakistan and whatever state the people of that state come together in, never considered in that context. So why cannot we? So we should be actually aspiring to even fix these small, and he was so kind in his words saying it's very good in Pakistan, it's not as bad as whatever, but there is some small issues. He should not even feel those small issues. And the fact that we have those small issues still means that there's still some work to do. And then when you create that space, you create those pluralistic societies. You can pick up the history book, Filipe, and I'm pretty sure Professor Cássius as well know, and Professor Muhammad. You can go through the history books. You spoke about the Roman Empire. Why was the Roman Empire successful? Pluralistic society. Why was the Muslim Empire successful? Pluralistic society. Why was you can think about anything, United States, which today unfortunately is heading in the other direction, is because it was a pluralistic society. So when you create this space, you create inclusion, you can create these aspects. And I'll be honest, in fact, you'll be very surprised. Sometimes when I speak to more of the radical factions within the Muslim schools, and dialogue is important, I'm telling you. You need to convince a lot of these young men that the track they're on or the thought processes is not accurate. I give them from their very own books, their very own authors, alternative ideas that they've never read about. I said, this is why you're channeling only certain information. There's a book, for example, by Imam Zahabi, who's a very famous scholar amongst the Salafs, the Salafi school and whatever. And even he says, if your Christian neighbor gives you a gift of an Easter egg, it's permissible to accept it. And when I share that with them, they're like, no, this can't be true. And I said, no, it is. It's in his book. Have you bothered to read his books? And I bothered to read them because in order for us to have dialogue, we must speak to the people in the manner in which they understand and respect. So if they have certain books, great. Let me go through those books. Let me have a dialogue based on that level. If I'm talking to a Christian, let me read the Bible first. I'm very fortunate that I was given the opportunity to study the entire Bible, not only the Revised Standard Version, which is, of course, from the Catholic Church in its entirety with the priest, but also the King James Version. And the reason I had, because I wanted to understand, I wanted to have dialogue. I hate to be the one to act on ignorance. This should be a shameful thing for any human being to act on ignorance, to act on without knowledge and understanding on base passions. And this is something I hope we can take today, is that we must educate, we must spread the education, spread the dialogue, And this Easter should be an opportunity to understand what Easter means to the Christian community and talk about it. Talk about the similarities, talk about the things that are different, talk about what it is, take away those misconceptions. So glad to be here. Thank you, Furqan, for sharing this. I hope this is just a step, and these dialogues continue, not only from the Sarim platform, from the various platforms we are all involved with, which I'm pretty sure reach out to a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Syed Muaz Shah, for providing your interfaith perspective and a unique, recommendation to have dialogue. And this is the dialogue that we're doing right now. It's a right step forward towards positive things. So I would quickly move our attention to Barcelona, Professor Muhammad Derviş Mete, who's been patiently waiting throughout this discourse as an Endnote speaker. I'll give out his introduction, then I'll request him for his Endnote speech. Professor Mete is a legal scholar and a former practicing lawyer. He's currently pursuing PhD at the University of Edinburgh with a focus on constitutional referendums in competitive authoritarian regimes in Latin America. He holds a Bachelor of Law from Ankara University from 2014. He did LLM from Derviş University in 2018 and has a Master in Public International Law from Leiden University in 2020, supported by the prestigious Jean Monnet Scholarship awarded by the European Commission. His academic, professional, and background spans constitutional law, international law, and democratic processes of transitional regimes. Over to you, Professor Mete.
Thank you, Professor Furqan Ahmed. Thank you for this amazing organization. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. We have heard highly insightful thoughts from all our experts from all over the world. So, as it's an Endnote speech, I would like to summarize what we get from all these experts very briefly, and I would like to then give my opinion very briefly. Dear Cardinal Joseph Coutts brings to the fore the issue that there are several similarities among mainstream religions, but for example, let's say between Christianity and Islam. But unfortunately, we tend to more focus on the differences and divergence instead of the similarities. And regrettably, this triggers conflict and division. Professor Syed that I have met in a conference, Baghdad, and Dr. George mentioned that the disconnection between what the law says and how the society takes action, how the society and authorities react in their daily lives. And also, Dr. Goldy George goes into some specific details of constitutional articles and how law, not the constitution, the law and the wrong implementation of the law is opening avenues for persecution and flagrant human rights violations. And these Professor Chais and Dr. George's thought remind me the discussion in the constitutional law literature is about the constitutional norm and constitutional reality contradiction. So if the law does not comply with the reality, does not match with the reality, so what's the point of having a norm in the highest norm, the Kelsen's hierarchy in the constitutions, I mean. So this is also a crucial point. Dear Cynthia Stephen touched upon persecution is not something new. Yes, that's not something new. And almost all over the world, we are seeing suffering people, suffering Christians, suffering Muslims, Hindus. And there is also another point. Those who don't believe in God, they are also suffering as well. And Easter symbolizes the resurrection from, let's say, death to life. from dark to light, from pessimism to optimism, and from defeat to victory. Dear Philip gives some specific example again of the persecution across the world, including in China, Nicaragua, and even in Western countries as well. And he also re-evaluated the meaning of the dignity. Another crucial point he made is that sometimes persecution brings hope as well. When people suffer, this might trigger other people's interest in those suffering people and their belief. And then this might end up, spreading the religion and spreading the belief of those suffering people. So it comes with hope. It's not only persecution, it's not only violations. It might trigger hope as well. And lastly, Syed Muaz shared his insights with us on Islamic law. And we have heard a great recital of Quran, Holy Quran. And he shared different perspectives.
Yeah.
And he shared different perspectives on Jesus Christ's suffering. The similarity between Christian and Islamic perspective is that Jesus Christ is alive with us. I think this is the main takeaway. How do we keep him alive with us? What's our responsibilities? All these thoughts are amazing. I would like to thank you, all of you. And I would like to briefly give my opinion as well. We often think, the persecution in headlines or statistics, but we should be aware of that. This is not just numbers. Behind every number, we should be aware that human beings and humanity is the main target. And that's why Easter is a very good example. It's not just a ritual. It's a fact. It's a reminder that even the world turns away, God doesn't, Allah doesn't. Unfortunately, as we said, persecution is not something new, and we have heard a lot of examples from participants. Throughout history and across many regions, believers of all faiths have suffered under the powerful man's hand, under the authority. For example, we talk about Asia. There are Uyghur people, Uyghur Turks and Muslims. They're suffering and they're facing systematic assimilation just because they are trying to follow their belief. They are trying to live a life according to their religion. In the Middle East, and it's quite ironic because it's the very lands that the faith and civilization were born, Palestinian people are currently facing genocide, crimes against humanity. But of course, genocide is not something new, but what is new is the entire world. I'm not talking about the average people because they have heart. They are trying to object. They are trying to show their solidarity with Palestinian people. But I'm trying to say the authority, the states, they all turn their back to Palestinian people. It's not only problem. Silence is not the only problem. They provide their official support to genocide. And when people try to speak up for the persecuted people, they have becoming targets because they are risking their lives, their reputations, their jobs. They have the risk of losing all what they have. That's why those who say don't kill children or let's pray freely, this might be punished as well. But that's why showing solidarity across faith is so vital. It's very crucial as a Muslim. I'm a Muslim. Alhamdulillah. It's very important for me to show my solidarity with Palestinian people. But it's much more important and valuable to show their solidarity if those people are not Muslim. And similarly, there are persecuted people across the world, persecuted Christians. If a Christian provide their support and show their solidarity for those people, it's valuable, of course. But as a Muslim, if I bring this issue and if I stand with them, stand with those persecuted Christians, I think it has some more value. That's why we need to know that as a scholar, activist, or concerned individuals, our responsibility is not just, study and research all these issues, all these flagrant human rights violations, but also stand with those people by disseminating knowledge. This is the only thing maybe that we can do, but this is very important and crucial. I will stop here. I know time is up. I would like to thank you, all of you. It was an amazing academic event. And of course, huge thanks goes to Professor Furqan Ahmed for organizing such an amazing and insightful and meaningful and timely academic event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Brother Muhammet Mete, for expressing your thoughts over the discourse today. And thank you so much for providing your endnote speech over what the other eminent speakers spoke about. We are greatly thankful to His Eminence Cardinal Joseph Coutts and His Excellencies like Professor Shah, Brother Filipe de Vele. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. And Dr. Goldy George, Syed Muaz Shah, Sister Cynthia Stephen, and others who have joined this event. On this note, I would like to conclude, although we don't have any questions so far, because we've already stretched out our available time. So thank you so much to our esteemed speakers for your deeply enriching contributions. What we have witnessed today is more than an academic inquiry. It is actually a testimony to ensuring relevance of faith in the hostile times. And we are surely living in the hostile times right now. Easter is not merely a celebration of victory over death, but a call to radical hope, especially for those who stand at the margins of society. From Karachi to Sao Paulo, from Lisbon to New Delhi to Barcelona, our conversation today has reaffirmed that persecution, though real, cannot extinguish the moral and spiritual fire of those who believe in life, justice, and peace. So on this note, on behalf of SARIM, I thank you for all of your participation. May this webinar serve as a catalyst for deeper engagement, scholarship, and advocacy on behalf of persecuted Christian communities across the world. We encourage you to remain connected with SARIM and join us in future conversations, as Syed Muaz Shah has already offered us some crossroads of doing so. With that, we bring this webinar to a close. Thank you, and may peace and grace be with you all.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it so much, Furqan. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.